My guest today is Kathryn Grayson Nanz. Kathryn, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I appreciate your presence here and lending your expertise in what is it you do?
Oh gosh, I'm lucky. I do a little bit of everything. So
Me too.
my job title right now, I get to be a design and developer advocate over at Progress. I work on the Kendo UI for React and Vue products, as well as some of our design and styling tools. But yeah, I started off my career as a graphic designer. So what I went to school for and did, and
Hmm.
kind of meandered over into front end engineering, and did that for a while before I got kind of pivoted over into advocacy work. So I feel lucky to have gotten to
That
bounce
sounds
around
like
a
a
bit.
really fun job, and I agree. It does sound like you're really lucky. But we want to specifically talk about usability testing, which you
Yeah,
brought that up off camera, and maybe usability testing for developers, which is kind of a different paradigm for some folks. I think a lot of organizations, here's the developers over here, they're creating something like a UI.
right.
Here's the testers over here, they're testing it, and there's this schism between the two. But that's not always true. So maybe that's not a good thing. What are your
Yeah, I
opinions?
think in an ideal world, right, I would love for developers to feel empowered to be part of that process. That was something I think I've gotten to. One of the benefits of having a wandering career like
Okay,
that is that I've found that it makes a big difference when you get to talk to the users directly, which is something designers get to do a fair bit and not so much for developers. But developers actually make a ton of kind of design decisions that they probably don't even think about. All the little like micro copy that goes into buttons or instructions, or when you're thinking about how a particular feature will work or what a user flow might look like when you're adding features to an app that already exists. You know, if you're really lucky, you have a big design team that is able to kind of hand you that stuff and work with you. But that's not always the case. A lot of
sure.
times, certainly a lot of places I've worked, there might just be one or two designers. And a lot of times developers are kind of filling in the gap and making, game time decisions while they're coding. When they have that insight into users and what they're thinking and how they use the app, and they have a kind of a more holistic understanding of the whole picture, I thought it actually makes for better end work, better
I
software.
agree. And then what about the testing aspect of it? Is it part of a developer's responsibility to do usability testing, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question, right? Is it part of a developer's responsibility? Arguably, no, right? It's not
Okay.
their specialty, and I think it's okay to kind of start to draw some boundaries around what the main part of your job is. But is it beneficial? Absolutely. And
Okay.
again, right, when you're in those non-ideal situations, maybe if you work at a really big company, you've got a whole team of UX professionals and designers, and they're the ones running usability tests. And developers can kind of watch or sit in the background or kind of keep an eye on things. Hopefully, they're still involved, even if it's not their primary job. But I've also worked at like a lot of startups, or I've seen developers launch side projects or work on little stuff. And in those cases, you may not have a design team or a UX professional that can run usability testing, but it doesn't make it any less valuable to be able to close that loop with your users and see how they're using what you built. And is it working? Is it actually solving their problems? Are they even using it in the way you think? Are they using what you built at all? So the more we can kind of, and I already said close that loop, but I can't think of a better term for
Yeah.
being able to talk to the people that use what you built and gain a greater understanding of what you can do in the future to make it a better fit for them, solve
Yeah.
their
Ultimately, we're
problems.
building software for people and to make their
Exactly.
jobs easier or their lives better. And knowing what their needs are helps. We're throwing around some terms here.
Mm.
UX. Define that, please.
User experience. So, right, a lot of times we see that, right? We'll see written like UI/UX, like it's all one thing. UI refers to the user interface, which is the literal visual graphical user interface, the buttons and the layout of the page,
Mhm.
and the kind of structural visual look of what's
Okay.
being built, the front end. User experience is kind of ideally invisible. When it's good, you don't notice it at all. The user experience is the flow of the user through the app, how they accomplish their tasks, how they find what they're looking for in what you've built, whether it feels frustrating to use a website or good or challenging or, whatever it may be. It's more looking at things like information architecture, how things are structured within the layout and the flow. And yeah, again, just creating an experience that feels easy,
Uh-huh.
seamless, intuitive as much as we can.
And that leads into this idea of usability. The more usable it is, the better a user experience it is. But we mentioned
Yes.
usability testing. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times as developers, we think just kind of about more QA style testing, right? Can I break an input? Are there bugs? That kind of stuff.
Okay.
But you can make an app that is technically perfect and still very unusable, you
Okay.
know? So usability testing is watching a user go through the process of completing a task or solving a problem using the software and then seeing where there's pain points or where it falls short or where they get stuck or maybe where they succeed, where it feels really good and where it flows really smoothly and they think, gosh, that was easy. And that can kind of shape feature decisions in the future. We might find something that's missing that we need to build. We might want to streamline something that we thought felt easy, but other folks are struggling with. Um, yeah, and just kind of shapes. It's great for roadmap shaping and finding pain points that you probably didn't even know existed.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it involves human beings as opposed to software tools more than anything.
Yes.
Tell me a little about the process when trying to implement some usability tests. What are some things that I need to think about, set up?
Yeah. So I think the first step is thinking about what you would want to test. Because you can't really usability test the whole app or a whole website in one fell swoop. You want to try and isolate one particular task or user flow. So that might be something like creating an account or completing a search or navigating to this specific tool, right? Then you're going to kind of think about the steps that it takes that you think that it would take to get there, how you would do it. And then you'll sit down with a user that could be in person or it could be virtually, something like
Okay.
this. And you will quite literally watch them do it. You'll say, hey, could you show me how you would search for a flight from Asheville to Boston? And some people might go to Google. Some people might pull up a Delta website. Some people might go look at some other third party travel thing. They might, call a travel service.
Hmm.
That's just an example of like how many different
Yeah.
ways are there to solve one problem. Even when you have a piece of software that you think you may have only created one flow for, there's similar different diverging paths that will appear. Users are doing weirder stuff with what
Yeah,
you
they
built
might
than
surprise you.
you can even
They may
imagine.
not use the software in the way you expect them to use it.
Exactly. So that's the goal of usability testing, is to kind of see, what are you doing? How would you solve this? If I tell you to make an account, do you go to a settings thing? Do you look for a login button? What kind of flow are you looking for? And when you complete that, are there places where you get stuck? Are there
Okay.
questions that didn't make sense to you? Are there bugs you encountered that we didn't catch? And when you watch somebody step through all those things, you're kind of asking them to think out loud. You're watching their face to see if they look, angry or confused or happy or excited. You're listening to them go, "Oh, I can't find it," or like, "Where's that thing?" Or, "I swear I just saw whatever." And you're taking notes on all of that. And when you do that with a handful of people, patterns start to emerge. Almost never do you have something where like just one person has an issue and nobody else has it at all. So if you test with 4 or 5 folks and you see something come up, 3 or 4 times, then you start to have a pretty good indicator that, okay, maybe this part of our interface or our application or a flow is not doing what we wanted it to do. So what steps can we take to try and mitigate that? Where exactly are people getting stuck? Is this, do we need to update the copy in our instructions? Do we need to make something bigger and more visually noticeable? Do we need to reorient this so that they have to do this step before this step? Those kinds of things that, again, may not be caught in a more technical review, but can still have a huge impact on the usability of the software.
I see. So what we're looking for really is those pain points, places where the user is frustrated, where they're having
Yes.
problems, where they're stuck and delayed, parts of it that are maybe not intuitive of what the next step is. And so that
Yeah,
way we know that's where we should put our attention to
exactly.
make that part better. And when I say better, I mean more usable. Is there any you need a person, you need a computer. Is there any other special equipment that I need for doing this?
You can actually do it with almost no equipment at all. Of course, if you're looking for equipment, there is fancy stuff you can get, eye tracking software and heat mapping things that will watch where they move their cursors and
Hmm.
timers that will see, how long they spend on each page. But you can
Does that
also,
does that help?
it depends on what you're looking for, I would say. It gives you more data,
Hmm.
which never hurts.
Okay.
But I would say if you're just starting out, all you really need is a webcam and a microphone and
Hmm.
a screen, a device to test on. And just from that alone, if it was just, you came over to my house and I watched you use something that I had built, I would gain a ton of information just from
Okay.
kind of seeing what's happening there. I think the other stuff starts to help when you're working with greater scale. If
I
you're
see.
looking for,
If you want to test
then you can,
100 people, then eye
right,
tracking software might be more efficient than me sitting there watching 100 people one after another.
right. But it's actually Nielsen of Nielsen Norman did an interesting study that shows you really don't need to test with that many people to be able to see results. He
Hmm.
proposes kind of an iterative approach where you do 3 rounds with just like 5 users each. So a
Okay.
total of like 15 people. And claims with that you can kind of you catch, I want to say it's like 80 or 85% in the first round with the first five. And then
Okay.
you fix, what you found. You test again with a different five and you catch kind of the remaining 10, 15. You catch, iterate again, test again with the last five. And at that point, you should have been able to fix approximately 100% of
Makes sense.
usability
And
issues.
even if you're not 100%, there's diminishing returns in
Right.
going through that over and over again. Well, Catherine, when I think about testing, as a software developer, I think about automated tests, either unit tests or integration tests. I give it a
Yep.
bunch of inputs, I have expected outputs, and then I run my suite of tests, and at the end of it, I get a bunch of passes and a bunch of fails. There's a lot of setup, but once it's done, once that setup's done, then I can automate that. Is there any way to automate this testing, this usability testing you're talking about?
I don't think so, which is probably not the answer you wanted to hear. But I think actually one of the things that you said there that creates that difference is expected outputs, right? You know exactly what you're testing for, and you can do a like, this is 2 plus 2 should equal 4, and if I don't get 4, it's wrong. There's not inherently a right or wrong with usability testing. What you're looking for is just observation and patterns, and generally positive or generally negative responses. But one person that can't complete a task doesn't inherently mean what you created is wrong. You're looking for,
Okay.
patterns. So I would say, yeah, that combined with the fact that automation kind of you lose the human element of it there, which again is nice sometimes for doing something like running a bunch of unit tests. You don't necessarily want to be a human present for all of that. But when you're trying to watch someone's reactions, and judge their facial expressions or their level of frustration or joy, that's a hard thing to automate. In fact, we usually recommend that there's a facilitator kind of running a usability test, but then also an observer, so that afterwards you can kind of come together and discuss and kind of talk through what happened, because you may have different interpretations. If someone's quiet, one person might be like, oh, it looked like they were really struggling. But another person could see that and go, oh, I thought it looked to me more like they were just thinking.
Okay.
There's different ways to interpret. It's yeah, it's a little bit more subtle, I
Okay.
think, and
Yeah, and
human
people are
based.
very different, just as you described. Some will tell you the problem, some will just stare quietly at it, and some are more computer savvy than others. If they've used a lot of software, then they'll. Some people are used to finding bad
Exactly.
interfaces and get working around them. Is
Precisely.
there anything that we haven't covered that you feel is really important for our viewers to hear?
I think just that if you're if you're curious about it, it's easier to do than you think, and you can start on a smaller scale than you think. I think there's often a lot of fear that's like, well, I've never done this, and we don't have a big budget, and we don't have a ton of time. It would just be, me and my teammate. But even if you're only talking to one or two people, even if you can't manage those, 3 rounds of 5 that we talked about, that's 2 more people than you were talking to
Fair
before.
point.
And what you hear back will start to shape it. And ideally, hopefully, that kind of gets the chance to grow. And, the 2 people you talk to this month could be 5 people next month. But whatever you can do, I think similarly to accessibility, right? The more you're working on it and the more you're doing it, it's not necessarily an on-off switch. It's a spectrum of the more you do, the better it gets.
Yes, true. Are there any resources you can recommend for people to learn more?
Oh gosh, tons. Let me think. At the risk of promoting one of my own things,
Go for it.
I have an O'Reilly course on usability testing.
I have an O'Reilly subscription. What's it called?
There's a video course. I think it's usability testing for non-usability professionals. We might have to re-record that one so I can remember the name of the
just
thing
send it to me. I will put it in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yes. And you do a lot of public speaking. Do you have something lined up? Are you going to be on the road traveling and speaking?
I don't think I've got any more speaking lined up for this year. I get to do a little bit of traveling as part of advocacy work. We're doing some sponsoring. So if you'll be at Magnolia Conf out in Jackson or at React Summit up in New York, then we'll cross paths there. But I think I get the easy way out for the rest of this year with no more speaking engagements.
Right. I guarantee it'll pick up next year. Yeah, no, Kathryn, thank you so much for your time. This has been really educational.
Oh, thank you for having me. Technology is best when it feels like it can just disappear, and what's left is just the connection between friends.